Hello guys and welcome to the video. This video, as you can kind of plainly see, more than likely, is going to be what I think the projected win column is going to be for all 32 NFL teams. I am going to go in this order. It's a little random. It's not division by division type of thing, but otherwise, for the teams that are up here that are obviously have more wins, I'm going to analyze more the games that I think they will lose. And for teams down here, and that sort of thing, I'm obviously going to analyze the games that the games to me that I think they'll be able to win, type of thing, because they'll obviously be a low column win, and I'm not going to go over and be like, oh yeah, this game, I see them losing or whatever, when they're going to have, potentially double digit losses type of thing. But without further ado, we'll start with the Rams, and I do have the schedules for every single team in order, and I'm going to kind of look it through, and I'm going to, see, what I really think. So starting off with the Rams, I'm kind of looking at them. I do have them winning their first couple weeks, Houston, then Tennessee, losing at Philadelphia, honestly, just because I think that the Rams, it's kind of predicated on them being able to stop the run and that sort of thing, even though I think that, it was a very close game and the Rams had Philadelphia on the ropes in the postseason, but it's in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, as we all know, is a very good team. Philadelphia probably being their first loss. The next loss that I really have them having is in week 6 against Baltimore. I just think Baltimore is going to be a more well-rounded team, and I think they're going to just be, I think they're going to be a really, really dangerous team this year. I think they added good pieces in the draft, so 2 bird teams that the Rams lose to, 2 losses so far. Looking at the rest of their schedule, Jacksonville win, New Orleans win. It's possible they split with San Fran, but it's kind of one of those that it's like, we'll wait and see. They meet San Fran twice, once in week 5 and another time in week 10. This is after their bye, which is in week 8, a couple weeks after that, and it's a 4:00 game. I'm going to have them split with San Fran. So we have 3 losses so far, to be honest with you. Seattle's another one of those teams I'm going to have them split with. I think Seattle is going to have some growing pains. I think they will be better because they'll have, a better, quarterback and maybe a better offensive system with the pieces they added, to be honest with you. And, the linemen that they added. So I anticipate them having a better run game, but I think that, that I have them splitting with Seattle as well. And Arizona's interesting because they're very, very scrappy, but it's one of those that it's like they finish the season there, and then it's like week 14 in December where they're at Arizona. I honestly have them winning both Arizona games. I think they're too good of a team, and I think that they'll beat Arizona twice. Another team that's very interesting is they play Detroit. I know that Stafford hasn't won against Detroit since he's moved to the Rams. I think Detroit's interesting because they just lost their center, Frank Ragnow, to retirement. I think that's very, very not good for Detroit, the guy who's been running that dominant O-line for years now. I'm going to say I actually think the Rams are going to win this game, but it is kind of one of those split games type of thing. They play Atlanta. Atlanta's always tempting because on paper they're very, very talented. And, it's a Monday night primetime game at Atlanta. I personally think that, depending on how Penix is in his first full year of starting, he was pretty good at the end of last season. But with Atlanta, it's just, I don't know. Their scheme is bizarre, and it doesn't always seem to work. So it's like Atlanta, I'd love to say is a split, but they're probably winning that game too. So looking at this, you're looking at, a split with San Fran, a split with Seattle, 2 losses there, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and then, maybe a game against maybe a game against Arizona. So it's like at most you have 5 losses type of thing. I'm putting the Rams at 11 to 13 wins. I think this is, I think this is reasonable. Could they win 14 if they had a really good year? Yes, they probably could. Moving on to the Browns. The Browns start their season off at Cincinnati. This is wild. It's obviously an AFC North divisional matchup. It's Cincinnati is at home. Cincinnati knows they've got to, have a little bit of urgency, and I think that they can beat, the Browns, obviously. I have them losing that game, obviously. Baltimore, loss. Green Bay, loss. Detroit, I'm going to say probably a loss. What are the games they can win here, in all honesty? The Browns. It's just kind of a toss-up, and we don't even know who their starting QB is. So it's like you have, Pittsburgh, they played tough once last year. I don't see that really happening. New York's a game in week 10. I know I have to go all the way to after their bye week in week 9 to week 10 to say, oh, they might be able to beat New York. But they didn't do much on their offense. I mean, they got weapons. They got Judy, Njoku, Fanning, who they drafted. We'll see if he even plays a lot type of thing. But it's like looking at the Browns' schedule, it's like, who do you have them beating on here? I have them potentially beating Tennessee, but then again, we don't know much, about how well Cam Ward is going to play. So it's like, you look at the Browns and it's just like, they maybe have a couple of wins here. Maybe it's if Las Vegas actually stinks somehow, they could beat them as well. But I doubt it. I honestly think that the Las Vegas is, just going to be a better team offensively, and that sort of thing. But it could be just a low scoring game with the defense of the Browns. I'm going to say I'm going to have them down here. I just don't see them outperforming this. I mean, maybe this, but yeah, I just don't like, the Browns' schedule. Not that it's necessarily tough, but I expect New England to be able to beat them this year and not have it be crazy close and that sort of thing. Moving on to the Falcons, who we just talked about. So the Falcons really dominated Tampa Bay last year. I think Tampa Bay, they just, I don't know, they just, I think, got out-schemed or out-thought for whatever reason. That was, Kirk's crazy games last year was against Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is the soundest team in that division. I do think they are the best team in that division. I'm going to say they probably split. I'm going to say Atlanta more than likely loses to Minnesota. I think Minnesota just has too many dynamic weapons. And you look at the Falcons, it's JJ McCarthy. It's his first primetime game, I'm pretty sure. And it's in Minnesota, though. So it's like, are they going to be able to travel and do really well in a primetime game? I don't know if it's Penix's first, but it's obvious, that's, it's obviously one of those things that it's like, a lot of heat are going to be on these two young QBs. But I think that Minnesota just has the better team. They have the better defense. I'm going to give the win to Minnesota, to be honest with you. Carolina, I'm going to have them beat them. I'm going to have them sweep Carolina just because I do think they improved enough on the defense type of thing, so it's like there's 3 wins. Washington, there's a loss. There's probably their 3rd loss of the year, to be honest with you, unless they really show up week 1. So 3 losses so far. Buffalo, a loss. San Fran, I'm going to say a loss. Miami, it's such a dicey thing, but I think Miami at full strength I think they beat the Falcons, to be honest with you. New England, I'm going to say Falcons only because I think that, I honestly think that, like, they're going to be able to do some things to give them headaches, but this is honestly, I'm kind of leaning towards a split. The other losses that I see them having potentially near the end of the season here, the Rams, like I mentioned, and I do have them sweeping New Orleans. I have, so it's like, let's look here. New Orleans twice, sweep two. Arizona, they beat three. Tampa Bay, will say split four. Seattle, New York, another five. Carolina, 6, 7. Seven, you know, they, it's like, it might sound crazy, but I do think that they're like a 4 to 7 win team this year. They don't have like the craziest difficult schedule, but they don't really play a lot of gimme teams, in my opinion. It's like, you look at this, you're in the weakest division, but it's like, I don't think you really make it above 7 wins, to be honest with you. And we'll really see, I guess, whether Raheem Morris is kind of wrangling in the troops this year in the second year as his head coach, and makes a dramatic thing. Now we have the Chargers. The Chargers, I think, are going to be a dominant team. I think they could definitely take their division this year. I know people are really preying on the downfall of Kansas City, but I honestly think this could be the year. They got enough weapons for Justin Herbert. I don't think that's really going to be a problem this year. Not like they have crazy depth or anything like that, but they have what looks like to be incredibly potentially balanced offense, where they have solid running game with two solid running backs, and then they have more than just Ladd McConkey, and then inconsistent Quinn Johnston. So that's kind of my analysis. And their defense, I think their defense is still going to be very, very good. I do actually have them beating Kansas City at home on the season opener, and that this is going to be a very, very tough thing. Granted, Kansas City will be at like full strength, I guess, but I also don't like what Kansas City did with their O-line. It's still kind of dicey and up in the air. I'm going to have them beat Kansas City. Now, let me look at the games I think that they're going to lose, this season. Denver, I can see posing a threat and splitting. I do think they'll split with Kansas City, so it's like there's one loss. I think they'll split with Denver. The Raiders are interesting because they always play them kind of tight type of thing. I don't think it was crazy tight last year just because the Raiders were so bad. But I do think that with a sound system, the Raiders and the Chargers games are always kind of electric. I will say I have them split within the division. So that's 3 losses total, obviously. And then let's look at some of these other games. I really only see, in terms of games, I see them splitting the division. Like I said, three losses there. Philadelphia, probably a loss. I like, the matchup, to be honest. That looks like it's going to be a very crazy game, but it is at home, so the Chargers have that advantage. I honestly would probably count them out if they were going to Philadelphia, but it's like, other than that, I really don't have them losing any other games. They'll be 3-3 likely within the division, maybe sweeping the Raiders, potentially. And then it's like all their other games, Houston's interesting. We'll see where they're at. That's obviously a late season game where the Chargers are also at home. So I think it's Houston's game, to lose. But it's like all these other games that they have, I don't see it. So it's like, that's a 4-loss season, maybe Washington, 5-loss season type of thing. So I have the Chargers up here. I think they can, easily secure 11, and, that's very good. Now we move on to San Fran. San Fran is interesting. Obviously, injury plagued to hell last year, but they say McCaffrey is going to be full go this year. He is their kind of like, besides Trent Williams, it's like he's their difference maker. Looking at their season, I'm going to have them split with Seattle. I'll have them sweep the Cardinals, to be honest with you. I think they're going to go for a revenge game there where the Cardinals came back and it was kind of, I wouldn't say a fluke victory, but it was kind of crazy. So it's like I'm gonna have them sweep Arizona, to be honest, because I don't think Arizona added enough. And I think if San Fran's fully healthy, they're gonna be very good. And I think that defense is gonna be a lot better under Sala this year. So we'll have them split with Seattle because we all know those games are pretty insane, you know, and we'll have them sweep Arizona. And then as for the Rams, I'm going to have them split with the Rams here. I said the Rams could definitely sweep the San Fran, but like giving them kind of the benefit of the doubt here, as like their best possible outcome, they probably split. So it's like we have 2 losses, 1 to Seattle, 1 to the Niners, and then looking at any of the other games that are kind of like, hey, we probably will lose this game. They have an easier schedule this year, so it's like you look at the Houston game. I don't see them losing it just because Houston didn't address their O-line. I will have them beat Atlanta, which is another kind of interesting game in week 7. Tampa Bay, I'm gonna have them lose as well, just because I think Tampa Bay's O-line and their dynamic offense and that sort of thing, I think it's going to be tough for them to travel across the country, play Tampa Bay, who's, just a very sound team that added where they needed to in the offseason. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to say they lose, and it seems ridiculous, but I'm going to say they lose like 4 games. I think that San Fran can definitely return to kind of the positive gain and be fighting for this division. This, the division, the NFC West is just pretty stacked with 3 good teams. Like San Fran definitely had a down year. Don't get me wrong, I'd love for them to have a down year after extending Purdy and they're, down here. But if I'm being realistic, it's up here. Now we move on to the Carolina Panthers, which is interesting because you got Bryce Young had a resurgence last year. They played very scrappy with some very good teams. It almost came close to beating the Chiefs and that sort of thing. So I think this year is going to be very, very interesting. I like their coach. I think he's just been slowly developing, trying to get the right pieces. And I think that they do have a competing roster now. Now, whether it'll gel out, we'll have to wait and see, because obviously they got more, they got T-Mac in the draft. They have good running backs. I think that this is a team that will compete, and assuming Bryson doesn't regress again, which I don't think he will. I think he was making very impressive throws at the end of last year, and with more weapons, it'll make it a little bit easier on him, entering his third year in the league. Now the teams they can beat, I'm still going to be, hesitant on here. I don't think they can actually beat Arizona. I just don't think that they're going to be, a crazy enough team. Jacksonville week 1 is interesting. They go to Jacksonville. They start their first 2 weeks are on the road, Jacksonville to Arizona. It's just one of those things. Atlanta, what do I have them even going in the division? I think that they could sweep New Orleans potentially, even though New Orleans seems to give Bryce Young a lot of issues. So I'm going to split New Orleans, both games that are in the mid to later part of the season. So that's one win. I'll have them beat New York. I'll have them beat the Jets. Sorry, I better specify that. Just because the Jets, who really knows? So there's 2 wins, 1 to New Orleans, 1 to the Jets. Atlanta, I'm going to say, is going to sweep them, to be honest with you. I just don't see it. And it's like Tampa Bay, they play twice in the last 3 weeks, which is wild. I don't think they're going to be able to beat Tampa Bay either. So it's like looking at this schedule of the Panthers, they could have a really rough go at it just because they have, what looks like to be not an easy schedule type of thing. So it's kind of ridiculous to say Jacksonville's a team I could see them beating potentially, but Jacksonville, loaded up, and did some things. So it's like I really only see them, maybe sweep. I feel like they could sweep New Orleans just because New Orleans, later in the year they're a little banged up usually. But it's like at most I'm kind of classifying them as one of these other teams this year, unless they very, very much improve on offense. I just think their offense is kind of yet to be proven, and their defense wasn't exactly, the best last year, even though they added pieces. I just think they have kind of a tough schedule. Now we move on to Seattle. Seattle, I think they do have a roster that can be very, very good. I think they could sweep their division potentially and make really that much of a name for themselves. I think that last year you just kind of saw the offense that stuttered and stuttered and stuttered. I think they got rid of some guys that were locker room cancers. I think that was part of the reason they got rid of Metcalf, and I think that if they have Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker healthy, and the way that they added to the O-line, I think it's going to be a much improved offense just because of the additions to the O-line. And that, they kind of realize that, hey, we need O-linemen because it doesn't really matter, when they had Tyler Lockett, DK, and JSN last year, and it just wasn't working with, with Kenneth Walker. And then, Charbonnet was good, but it's like he's not enough to carry a team. I think that, Sam Darnold, I think that he's going to be a little bit more mobile than Geno was. I think a similar similar skill set, and we all know that Geno was throwing for a lot of yards, but I think with a more balanced offense, I think that Sam Darnold can thrive. Maybe not more than what he did with the Vikings, obviously, but I think that you don't need to be that way with Seattle, who can have a balanced attack, making them very dangerous. So with, me and my psychoanalyzing a little bit, who do I think that this team will lose to be honest with you? It's kind of one of those things that it's like, I have them honestly starting their season 7-0. Might sound insane, but I have them starting their season 7-0. I think that they can go into San Fran and they can go and they can whop San Fran week 1. That might be their only loss if they do lose in these first 7 weeks. I don't see them losing to Tampa Bay. I think they're too talented. And none of these other teams are really like, hey, this scares me if I'm Seattle. Washington, after the bye, it is in Washington, and it's a primetime game on in November. So you're going to be, pretty well rested with a middle of the pack bye. And, I guess not an early bye, but it's like, I'm going to have them beat Washington. I think that they are going to be a better team than Washington, and I think that they're going to be able to stifle what was already kind of not a good pass rush by Washington, and it's going to allow them to thrive. So that's another team that it's like, many people could say that, oh, Washington's going to win that, but it's like looking at the rest of these games, I'm going to have them split with Los Angeles. So there's 2 potential losses on there. And then you look at this and it's like, I think they do sweep the Cardinals. I don't think the Cardinals did enough. And it's like, you look at the rest of their schedule, and this might surprise some of these people, but I honestly think Seattle could be up here. I know it seems insane with, 2 of the other teams in the division being above 10 wins as well, 11 and up. But I think Seattle could realistically do this, and it's like they could even lose, they could obviously lose a San Fran game, the Commanders game I'm on the fence about. And then it's like you look at maybe Minnesota's another loss, which would bump them down here. But I honestly think that, it's going to be kind of the interesting, I wouldn't say revenge game, but it's maybe going to be, that Darnold did so well in Minnesota that he's returning to that stadium. I don't think he's going to get booed, really. I mean, sure, there's going to be people that boo him, but it's like Minnesota. He played there really, really well last year, and so it's almost going to be like, he knows the field, better than McCarthy in the stadium, better than McCarthy or whatever, and he's going to silence the doubters and that sort of thing. But it's like, you look at the rest of these games, there's not a bunch of crazy games on the schedule, for Seattle. Moving on to the Bills. The Bills, obviously a very good team. We have, obviously the first Sunday night game of the year is against Baltimore. I'm just going to say this. It's going to be a split. Baltimore could have easily beaten the Bills last year in the conference if Lamar Jackson hadn't turned the ball over quite a bit. So I'm going to say this is a split game, which means that I'm not going to count it as a win, or more so leaning towards a loss, to be honest. I think that this game is going to be I honestly think they could lose this game, though. I think Baltimore has a crazy good defense, and it's like, well, Josh Allen has been a phenomenal QB and won MVP. I think Baltimore is looking back to the year prior to last year when they lost to the Chiefs, and they could have beat the Chiefs, when they were at home, for the first game of the year. So it's like, looking at that, I do think this is the Bills game to lose, even though it's not at home. So I'm going to give the game to Baltimore, honestly, because it is also at their home. So there's one. Going down, what is another team that I think that they lose to? Kansas City. I'm not going to lie. I don't think they lose to Kansas City in the regular season here. I think that they know what's going down. I think they know that it's going to be, the first game in November. You're going to kind of know where teams are at. I think that you look at this, if you are the Bills, and if you lose to Baltimore, but then you win your next 6, then you're talking about going into Kansas City, or hosting Kansas City, and beating them. Remember when Kansas City beat the Bills at home in the playoffs? I think it's going to be loud. I think the Bills Mafia is going to be out for blood. That's a game that I'm going to say that the Bills do take, even though, a lot of people are like, well, we'll see if they can do it in the postseason should these teams meet. So it's like we have one loss so far, and then we're kind of going down, down, down. I don't really see any other teams that I should be like, yeah, this is a scary team for the Bills. Besides the Eagles. Here's the Eagles again. So it's like, we're looking at kind of, a team, to me, that can be up here. They can win 15 games this year, be 15-2 or something like that. Who would they have a hiccup against? Maybe Cincinnati. But even if you count Cincinnati as a loss, because it is late season Cincinnati, but they're hosting them. So it's like, it's going to be a tough game in, first game in December. It could be snowy. It's not going to be a passing kind of thing. It's in Buffalo. I'm putting Buffalo up here. I think they could really be up here this year. Moving on to my Packers, which of course I have thought about a lot. Being a Packers fan. So, and people are probably going to hate me for this and, roast me and really tell me, whether you think that this is actually a plausible thing. Because obviously, I am going to go down through the full list here for, any of my fans. If they are Packers fans, I don't really know. I haven't had people speak positively about, or negatively really, about what I think of my Packers. I think this year could really be an emergence year. And I'm saying that because the defense last year, while everyone wants to talk about the pass rush, everyone wants to talk about, the DB room. Who knows if Jair is going to be here? But, all signs point to him potentially being here. So I think that the defense performed above expectations last year. not really allowing a 100-yard rusher type of thing. I do think the division is tough, but it's one of those things to me that I think that this team is bound to make a leap. And I think that, more offensive weapons, more competition there. And, having a guy like Matthew Golden, who was really, really good, and the passing game really, for the majority, flopped because of drop passes on 3rd and 4th down. Look at the stats. So it's like, I don't think Jordan Love regressed like some people said, and that they overpaid for him. I think he was hampering an injury, and he would try to make things happen when he was unable to do so. And then later in the year, when he was fully healthy, wasn't making those mistakes. So unless he gets injured again, type of thing, which, would suck. I do think that my Packers have, and a lot of people are doubting them right now. So I have them winning the home opener against Detroit, of course, because I think Detroit's going to have growing pains. I'm going to have them beat Washington too, just because I think that Washington, they don't have a crazy run game and they don't have a crazy amount of weapons type of thing. And, we've got Xavier McKinney, who knows Washington pretty well with some of the players they've had on offense for a while. So there's 2 wins. And then Cleveland, Dallas, I'm going to have them beat Cleveland and Dallas. I don't see why not. People have Dallas being very good this year. I don't see it, and we'll get to that obviously in a few. Cincinnati's a team that obviously could be very, very tough. They're hosting them, though. I think it will be the first time that... I guess I can't remember if it is Joe Burrow's first time coming to Lambeau, but they're coming off a bye. I think that Cincinnati is more of a passing attack type of thing, and they don't have that crazy of a run game, or they didn't last year. I'm wondering if their O-line is going to, be able to hold up with, who knows who could be the pass rushers by this time, or who's going to be dominant for the Packers there, with Cincinnati having a shoddy O-line. So I am actually giving my Packers the win against Cincinnati as well. Philadelphia, to me, is the most likely loss, even though they're hosting Philadelphia. This is obviously kind of a game that's like week 10. You'll kind of know where the Packers stand, whether it's like stumbling around, beating the teams they should, dropping a couple of games. If they drop the game to Detroit, obviously could happen, and that sort of thing. And then it's like, what's another, if they drop the game to Washington, you're starting off the season 0-2, not good, panic mode, where you've got, a lot of, a few way games with the next 5 weeks. But it's like Philadelphia, I'm going to say, I honestly think that this team is going to be out for blood with them. I think that Philadelphia, while a very good team, the Packers played them very close. And pretty much until the game was, over, I guess, type of thing. So it's like Philadelphia, it's one of those things that it's like, I'm going to be split on it. So I'm going to take away a win with that. Minnesota is one of those curious ones. Final week of the season in week 12. Do I see him splitting with Minnesota this year? I don't know, because to be honest with you, I don't know enough about JJ McCarthy. And it's like, but I do have them beating them out. Chicago, a team they play twice within 3 weeks. Literally all games in December. So I don't know how well Chicago's really going to do. I think that Caleb, had self-inflicted holds on the ball last year where he just wasn't reading very well, and people want to blame his O-line. I think that his O-line definitely got better. Did their run game really get better? I don't think they really have a running back that's like going to be like, hey, so are they going to have to lean on the pass a little bit more, which Ben Johnson is not used to because he's had Sonic and Knuckles. I'll say this. I think the Packers, I'm going to say it. I think they sweep the Bears this year. I think the Bears are, and they didn't really address their pass rush too much. I think that the Packers sweep the Bears. They sweep the Vikings potentially. And I'll say they split with Detroit. Detroit, I don't think It'll be tough, but it'll be later in the season. It's on Thanksgiving, and at Detroit, obviously, that's going to be a crazy game. Denver's a curious game, but I'm having my Packers win that. So it's like, and then Baltimore. Baltimore's a game that I think my Packers are just not going to be able to win unless everything goes right. It is at home, but it's like, it's Lamar Jackson, and, it's going to be end of the season form. So it's like, unless Baltimore's already like secured like the 1 seed or some crazy scenario, I don't see my Packers beat him. So 1 loss to Baltimore, Detroit, and then, Philadelphia. I'm putting my Packers up here. People might say I'm crazy. People might say I'm biased, which go ahead and say it. But my Packers don't have a crazy schedule. And there's a good amount of unknowns in the North this year. While I think the North will be very competitive, and I think it could, go almost any which way, this is kind of my max projection type of thing, which I've been doing with other teams. So, moving on to the next team, I'm going to the Saints. The Saints opening against Arizona. I'm really going to look at, how many games I think that they can actually win. And we don't even know, obviously, who the QB is going to be for their team. A team that I could see them beating is potentially the Giants, in week 5. The Giants are kind of one of those that's like, who the hell knows as well. Heck, I'll have them take the game against Arizona just because I think that the Saints do well against these shorter QBs and their defense is, pretty good. So it's like there's, potentially 2 wins, even though Arizona, to me, it's their game to lose potentially, so I'm split on that. I'm going to have them beat the Giants. I'm going to have them split with Carolina. So there's 2 wins. And then looking at the rest of their games, I honestly don't have them beating the Jets. I think the Jets are really going to return to form and be a better defense, than last year. So it's like, I don't have them beating the Jets. I think this is another team that is doomed to be down here, to be honest with you. And what is probably the worst division in football, to be honest with you. Now we move on to the Raiders. The Raiders are an interesting one. Against New England, it's in New England. Which team do I think had the better kind of off-season drafts? I'm actually taking New England. I don't think they win their home opener and that sort of thing. And then it's like we have, the divisional opponents. I'm going to have them get swept, to be honest with you, by the Chiefs and by the Broncos. The Chargers, for whatever reason, I just feel like they play them scrappy, but they could be swept by them as well. But I just don't, It's really kind of interesting. Maybe they do get swept by them as well. I'm actually kind of leaning that way. Who do they have them beating? I'm going to say they beat Indianapolis. There's a win. I'm going to say they beat Tennessee, to be honest with you. 2 wins. You know what? Heck, I will say that they actually have the firepower to beat Jacksonville. That's kind of my bold take win for them. And then I'm going to have them beat the Raiders. So that's Colts, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Cleveland. That's 4 wins. And then, we'll say 5 with New York. So it's like they're in this range. They could be higher, but I just don't really see it. And then we get to the Cowboys. The Cowboys obviously are a team that everyone is thinking are going to be very good. Here is my problem with the Cowboys, you guys. They don't really have a run game. They also lost Martin, which you can't tell me that the dude they drafted in the first round is going to be like, hey, this guy is our replacement. He's going to be a replacement to a guy who was just, an undeniably one of the best guards in the league. The best guard with the most longevity, if anything. You're not just going to replace Zach Martin. Dak is coming off, obviously, a serious injury. It's like we'll see if he's even more limited and less mobile because he would use his legs at times to escape. Those are kind of my things. They add Pickens. I'm sorry, but it's like, you got to develop this chemistry, and Pickens is a locker room cancer. And then you look at the defense, you get crapped on by your former player, DeMarcus Lawrence, saying there was, a lot of issues with that defense. We'll really see whether the defense returns to anything. They were crazily gouged last year. And it's like we've went through however many of these seasons where they get these DBs outperforming themselves. They get paid a lot of money, but then it's like, we still need to draft DBs. It's just, to me, it's just not a good look. And it's like, I think it's more of their pass rush than the DBs when the DBs do well, as far as I'm concerned. Like Siobhan Revel is a good draft pick. I'm really happy that they drafted a guy like him because I think he could be that difference maker corner, but he's coming off a major injury. We'll see. So let me look here and let me actually tell you guys the games I think that the Cowboys could win this year. I'm going to say the Giants. I think that they do take both games against the Giants, a team that they've belittled and picked on for years, that it's like, I don't think the Giants are going to really pose much of a threat. There is 2 wins. I'm going to say against the Jets. So both New York teams, 3 wins there. Carolina 4. Washington, I'm going to say, is going to sweep them, to be honest with you. Arizona, they'll beat. That's 5. The Raiders, I'm gonna say they're gonna beat the Raiders. So that's 6. And then you look at some of these teams down the line. That's what I see their ceiling as. And people might call me crazy, but it's like you're still kind of leaning on this, like, you're leaning on this, thing that people think that you're just going to be able to throw all game and that sort of thing. And it's like last year they kind of found out how to like stop CD, who had a crazy good year, and people could say, he, only had Cooper Rush throwing to him. It's just, but it's like, hey, he's still CD and he was getting wide the heck open. But it's like teams figured him out. They figured out how the Cowboys use him. The other thing that I think about is the coach. Schottenheimer has never been that good of a coach. And the coach plays a big part in whether a team is good or not. You can't tell me Schottenheimer's coming in there and you're instantly putting them up here. Maybe you guys, maybe the team's gonna play hard just because they're sick of losing, but. It takes more than just being sick of losing to win games. And it's like, I just don't see it with the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys, it's whatever. And then we move on to another team I don't really like, but it's like they could be really good this year. I think the Bears could be really good. So looking at this, we have opening against Minnesota. That's an L. Detroit. Ben Johnson returns early. I feel like this is going to be one of those games that it's like, well, it's not a prime time. It's going to be interesting. Do I think the Bears have what it takes to win? No, I don't. Against Dallas, it could be a split game. I think that, if Ben Johnson is able to implement a system and Caleb looks really good from the get-go type of thing, I think that this could be a close game. I think that, I'm not going to, maybe I hate doing the Bears, you guys. Do we give them a win here against Dallas after all I said about Dallas? maybe we do. We give them, a potential win against Dallas. The Raiders, I'm going to say they do take the win here. I think the Raiders are, unless Crosby is really just, pulverizing Caleb all day, which he definitely could, and they have, a very good pass rush on the Raiders now. Do they take this game? When they struggled against the run last year a little bit, and they don't have the defensive mastermind that they had last year, even though they didn't have him in the later part of the year. Potentially, I'm kind of having this as a split game against Washington. This could be kind of a revenge game, but it also could maybe not be. I kind of want to be optimistic, but I also don't want to be for this team. Do they go up against Washington and beat them here? I think that they potentially could, but I also think that they don't really have what the weakness of Washington is, and that's, a run game that I can essentially believe in before the season. I will give them a game against New Orleans. So at this point, it's like we look at, the Raiders and New Orleans are their 2 wins. Then we have, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and then New York. I'm going to give them the win against the Giants, just because I don't think the Giants with their QB situation, what is it going to be? So they have, 1, 2, 3, 4 games so far. Against Minnesota, I'll say they split 5. Pittsburgh, I'll say they'll beat Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, we just don't know. So that's 6. And then it's like, my Green Bay Packers, can they beat them? And it's like if they were to win, at Green Bay in Week 14, do they really, are they really able to hold it at home? Just a couple weeks later. I don't know. I'll have them split, I guess, optimistically with the Packers and get a win there. So that's 7. Cleveland, or wait, is that? So let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's 5. I don't know what I'm. 5. 6. And then, the 7 might be San Fran or maybe Detroit, but I just don't see it. So it's like I have the Bears right here. And while a lot of people are like, no, there's no way. It's like, you can't just tell me that a new system gets implemented. It means automatic wins. Like, they still need to perform a lot. And it's like, we'll really see if loading up on a ton of weapons when you already had good weapons. And as far as I'm concerned, we'll see whether that pans out without a running game. It's one of those things to me that it's like, if you're going to be a playoff team, you are going to have a very solid running game. And I believe that for years and years and years, which you look at, any of these teams up here, that I have, up here at the top, they all have pretty good running games. You could say Seattle, maybe not, but they have a crazy good defense, and then an offense that I think, will take off with the right players. But it's like all of these up here had good running games last year, besides San Fran. But San Fran will return to form given that McCaffrey's healthy. So moving on to the Colts. I'm going to have them lose against Miami, but I'm going to probably, I'm looking at this one more against the teams that I think that they beat. Tennessee's interesting. We'll say that they beat them. And then let's look at the rest of these. Do they beat Arizona? I don't think so. So Tennessee, is one of those interesting ones. I think that this team could beat Tennessee twice. I also think that they could lose to Tennessee twice. So we're going to give them a split. That's 1 win there. I don't have them really beating many of the teams on this list. Do they play Jacksonville tough or the Texans? The Texans are interesting because, they added weapons, but their O-line isn't better. So the Colts might see their opening there, but then you wonder if they're even able to score on them. No, I think they get swept by Houston, to be honest, late in the year. So then Jacksonville's late in the year too. This is obviously not a very good division in football, in my opinion. Like, none of these teams are like, hey, this is the clear bona fide winner of the division. So, let me have them split with Jacksonville. So we have 1, 2, 3 wins potentially, but Tennessee could definitely speak with, this is another team that I look at this with the problems they have. Even though last year they were like up here, but everyone knows they were overperforming last year by a lot. And they got pretty lucky last year. So it's like, moving them down here, I think that this is reasonable. Moving on to the Dolphins, who we just talked about, I'm going to, let's look at the games that I think that this team, can win. I think that they split with New England, to be honest with you, within their division. They get swept by the Bills, to be honest with you. They get swept by the Bills. They split with New England, potentially. And goodness, the Jets. I'm going to have them beat the Jets both times. So we have, 1 win with New England, 2 with the Jets, that's 3. They beat the Colts, that's 4. I'll give them a win against Carolina, that's 5. Cleveland Browns, 6. And then looking at the rest of these, New Orleans, that could be 7. Pittsburgh is dicey. Maybe that's 8. And then, you could potentially have a win against Tampa Bay. I mean, I'm not really sold on that. So that puts the Dolphins, in this range, our first 8 to 10. And now we move on to the Patriots. So the Patriots, I think, are going to be a much better team. I think Vrabel just knows that culture. I think that Drake May really, really looked really, really good last year, despite not having wide receivers or protection, which is just insane. Everyone was saying how he was going to get killed if they play him. And he didn't get killed. He was beat up a little bit, hit around. But the Patriots, I think, could be a very, very good team this year. So, looking at this, who do I have them losing to? Split with Miami. I still kind of firmly believe that. That's 1 loss. I think they play Buffalo tough, but I think that's 2 more losses there. So that's 3. Looking at these other teams that they play, I think that they, 3, potentially, you look at Atlanta, that could be 4. Tampa Bay, that's 5 more than likely. Cincinnati, 6. And then you also play Baltimore. So that's 7. So you're talking about 7 losses type of thing. I'm going to put them in this realm as well. But I think that they could realistically have a 10-win season. If they do better than expected, they could be up here. But I think that, looking at the Patriots, I do think that they're going to be better this year. And they weren't obviously crazy competitive last year, but they added the necessary pieces that they need to make their defense better, give more weapons, and give more time to Drake May, who, had a very accurate arm last year. I think the Patriots are realistically right here, middle of the pack team, potentially fighting for a playoff spot. But now we move on to the Lions. Of course, the Lions, man. So like I said, I think that they split with my Packers. So 1 loss there. I do think that they, split with the Bears, to be honest with you. I think that Ben Johnson's going to sneak away with a win against, his former team. I also think that the Lions are really going to hurt with O'Reilly now. I think that he's really a tone setter lineman and part of who their big 3 were. And they don't have, unless someone else emerges, they don't have like the big 3 of their linemen anymore, with Sewell, Ragnow, and then I can't remember the third guy's name. But so looking here, they split with Chicago, they split with Green Bay, I think, so it's like there's 2 losses. Baltimore, I think, beats the Lions here. They're going to Baltimore. It's a Monday night primetime game. Baltimore, comes in, takes advantage of the fact that, like, they have a really stout run defense and you're going to make Goff beat you. Anytime I've seen Goff have to beat a team, he doesn't do as well. I'm not high on Goff, as, maybe you guys know. And I just think that he gets exposed if they are not playing with a cushy lead where they can rely on the run and then make it easy for him. With these play action passes where it's like an easy, wide open guy. So it's like I have, 3 losses so far because they're splitting with Chicago and Green Bay and then losing to Baltimore. Cincinnati is interesting. I think that they actually beat Cincinnati because who's going to stop Hutch on Cincinnati? Kansas City, I think, is an interesting game. It's at Kansas City. It's a primetime game. I would like to say that I think the Lions do actually win this game. I think they win it based on the fact that Kansas City really hasn't fixed their O-line, and Hutchinson's going to maul and dominate, that game. And I don't think Kansas City, potentially can stop the offense, because they have a really good defense, but it could be a nitty-gritty game that's a toss-up. So it's like we're going to count that as like either a win or a loss, really just kind of, it's not going to either team. So it's like you have 1, 2, 3, 4 losses. Minnesota, I do think that, you could sweep Minnesota potentially. You have them after your bye at home, and then you go to Minnesota late in the year. We'll see whether JJ McCarthy is, is that guy, and he can play and run with the Lions. But I don't really have this as a split. I think the Lions will sweep the Vikings, to be honest with you. So that is 5 losses. Tampa Bay, potentially, 7. Washington, I just don't like that Washington doesn't have a ton of firepower. So I'm going to have them beat Washington. Philadelphia, I'll have a loss there. That's like 8 losses. Let me double check this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 5 with Kansas City. Tampa Bay always plays the Lions well, so that could be 1. 7, 7, and then maybe 8 against Los Angeles. I know I gave this in the Los Angeles favor, so that's 8 losses on the year. That means they would be, a 9-win team. I know that people are probably thinking that, like, hey, there's no way that they're going to be this bad. But it's like, it's one of those things to me that you look at these teams and you think about, the scenario that they're in, the situation that they're in, and it's like you lost both your coordinators, so we don't even know if the defense is going to look the way they did last year. And a lot of people wanted to say the defense was really, really bad because of the injuries and that sort of thing. They were still, not giving up a ton of yards, and a lot of their losses came because of turnovers from Goff. You look at the overall yards given up by this team, it was just not a ton last year, even with the injuries. But, that's kind of what I think about the Lions this year, and I'm not even joking on it. And you guys can say, hey, bias, go ahead. Moving on to Cincinnati. Cincinnati, I think, is going to be a very good team. I think they do need to beat Cleveland week 1, or you're in like, oh my God, we lost to Cleveland, type of thing. What games do I think that they actually will lose? I actually do think they'll lose to Denver, just because Denver, had a tenacious defense and they match up very well. So it's like, that's going to be a loss. Detroit, like I said, they could, there's some world out there where Burrow has a crazy game and he somehow beats the Lions, but it's like, I don't see it. Green Bay, potentially, but I honestly think it's at Green Bay type of thing. And it's, it's one of those things that it's at Green Bay. And, I think that the Packers are going to be a lot better of a team this year. And it's like without a run game, really, you're going to be able to play like drop back, rush four, and get pressure on Burrow. So it's like, you know, there's a second loss in my opinion. Then you have, games and games and games and games and games and that sort of thing. What's another team that I think they lose to? Baltimore, that's 3. Buffalo, it's just a crazy toss up to me, type of thing. I think that you could reasonably say that it's going to be a loss with a better defense from Buffalo. That was a shootout last year, so it's like that's 3 losses. We have Packers, Denver, Detroit potentially, but probably not. Or I mean, no, Detroit will be a loss 3. So then you have 4 with Baltimore. And then I'll say they'll split with Baltimore, to be honest with you. But 4-loss team. I think if they're playing their best type of thing, I'm gonna put them right here. I think the Bengals could easily take this division, but they also could have problems, with potentially the Ravens, which we'll get to. Tennessee, I'm going to kind of go over the obvious losses here. Denver 1, Rams 1. Houston, I'll say 1, they split. New England loss. Chargers loss. So we have 1, 2. 1, 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, Seattle and Jacksonville. Cleveland a win. San Fran a loss, 8 losses. Kansas City, I'm going to say a loss, 9 losses. And then potentially Jacksonville at the end of the year, another loss. So it's like you're talking 9 losses type of thing. You're talking a team that, could go 8 to 10, I guess. I guess that seems a little high to me. But it's like looking at their schedule, I do think that they're in this 8 to 10 range. Maybe we move them down here, 4 to 7. What are the kind of obvious wins they have? I'm going to say New Orleans, 1. Split with Jacksonville, 2. Cleveland, 3. Indianapolis split for 4. Raiders maybe for 5. Cardinals maybe, but I don't really see it. Houston, I think, will take both games, to be honest with you. And then it's like the Colts, you split there for 6 wins. 6 wins potentially. So yeah, I guess I miscounting, 6 wins. I think, in the 4 to 7 range. And then we move on to the Eagles. Eagles obviously opening the season against Dallas, hosting them. That's a win. Let me look and see who I even think that they'll lose to. There's no way that they're going to lose to Kansas City. I'm sorry, but after the pummeling they gave them, they're going to go right back and they're going to do the same thing. The Rams is obviously a game that they played them close and they almost beat them. I'm going to say it comes down to the wire. That's, a game I'm split on. Tampa Bay, I think, has a very good team and stacks up well against Philadelphia, to be honest with you, with a pretty good O-line and, pretty good offensive attack. And their defense, is getting better, and has big body defensive linemen. I think it's a crazy good matchup. And I think that, this game could go either way as well. We're going to say that, this is a potential loss where it's it's the Eagles' game to lose. Denver they beat, New York they sweep, Minnesota they beat. Green Bay, like I said, I do think that they beat my Green Bay Packers. I think that my Packers, could beat them. Like I said, I was being optimist optimistic with it here, but I think that they do beat. I think that my Packers, potentially could beat them, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles beat them. So it's like that's another game. That's like three games right there. Detroit, I'm going to have them beat. I just don't think Detroit's going to be, up to par to be able to beat them. Dallas, sweep, to be honest with you. The Chargers is interesting, but I don't think that they lose to the Chargers. And then they have Washington twice. I think that's going to be kind of a revenge sort of scenario where, Washington was able to scrape away with a win at the ending of the season last year when they probably shouldn't have been able to be honest with you, when Hurts went out. And it's like Buffalo's an interesting game, but Buffalo wasn't a crazy run stopper defense last year. I think they'll be better on defense, but I don't see them losing that game either. I have the Eagles, of course, up here. I think that they're still going to be, a very dominant team, and that sort of thing. Moving on to the Jaguars. So the Jaguars, they'll beat Carolina. They'll lose to Cincinnati, so one loss. Houston, I think that they'll trade games with this year, so there's 2 losses. San Fran is interesting, but I think that they lose that 2-3 losses. Kansas City, they lose. Seattle, they lose. So let me see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the first 7 weeks that I think are pretty obvious losses, to be honest with you. The Raiders, they could lose to, but I think that they'll beat the Raiders. Houston, I don't want to give them the sweep, to be honest with you, but I just don't trust the Jaguars. So it's like there's 8 losses, 9 Chargers. They beat Arizona. Honestly, I think that they do sweep Tennessee. So we're at 9 losses right now. Colts, I'm going to say they sweep them, actually. And then the Jets, they beat, and then Denver. So that's 10 losses. So you're talking about right here. And I just think that, the Jaguars have a lot to prove to, show me that they can win games and get over their inconsistencies. Denver Broncos next. So the Broncos, I'm going to count the games I think that they'll lose. Because I think that they are going to win more games than lose games. So, well, look at this. I'm going to say they lose one game against the Chargers. There's 1. Cincinnati, they're not going to lose that. Philadelphia, they lose. That's 2. Then you look at Kansas City, I'll say they split with. That's 3 losses, to be honest with you. Washington is such a wild card to me. I don't think that they lose to them, though. I think that they have too good of a defense, and they're going to be able to do too much offensively to control the clock against Washington. So I don't have them losing that. So the Raiders is interesting. I don't think that they really lose a game, to be honest, on paper, but it is a divisional game. I'll have them split. That is 3 losses. Green Bay, I'm going to say, are going to beat, Denver, just because I think that they'll have too much offensive firepower, even with how good the defense is of the Broncos. I think that they're just going to have enough firepower to be able to eke them out offensively, and that their defense is going to, be hard on Bo Nix. So it's like there we have Philadelphia, Cincinnati, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 losses. And then, that's kind of where I have them at. I have them as a 5-loss team, which, puts them up in this echelon. This kind of the similar tier with the Chargers. Moving on to the Giants. Excuse me, you guys. I am a little tired and honestly a little hungry. The Giants, let's see. Who do they beat? Who do they really beat this year? They have a tough beginning of the schedule. Washington, Dallas, I feel like will beat them just because they beat up on them, almost every single year, to be honest with you. They can't beat Kansas City. They can't beat the Chargers. New Orleans, you know what? I'll give them their first win against New Orleans. That'll be their first win. So we're sitting at 1 win right now. And then, let's look here. Could they beat San Fran? Probably not. Chicago, probably not. Green Bay, probably not. Detroit, probably not. New England, probably not. So it's like, you have 1 win to the Saints. And then, if JJ McCarthy really doesn't pan out, I still don't have them beating Minnesota. The Raiders, maybe. But it's like, this is kind of a tough schedule. Maybe they split with the Cowboys somehow. But I have the Giants down here. The Vikings. So the Vikings are curious. I'm going to think optimistically because I do think that, like, with the weapons that they have and the mind of O'Connell, I think that they, unlike these other situations where they have a new QB starting, I think that you can give the Vikings the benefit of the doubt, because O'Connell resurrected Sam Darnold's career. I think he can be really good here. I think they split games with Chicago. I think Ben Johnson, will be able to, win a game there. So there's 1 loss. They beat Atlanta. Cincinnati's tough. It's early season Cincinnati, but it's like, we don't know. I think they lose this game. So there's, second loss of the year. And then we're going down. Their third will probably be against Philadelphia. The fourth against the Chargers. I'll say they'll split with Detroit, but I do think Detroit could sweep them. So that's 5 losses. Baltimore's a loss. Green Bay, it wouldn't be surprised me if they split, the Vikings always seem to do that. That's 6 losses. Seattle, I'm going to say 7 losses. Washington's kind of a crazy, interesting game. They seem to always do better, than expected, against other high-scoring offenses. This could be a split. That could be 8 potentially. I am going to say they beat Dallas. They beat the Giants, so yeah, 7 losses total type of thing. I'm having the Vikings, right here. They could be higher, but I do think that they got kind of lucky last year, with some of their wins and how well Sam Darnold kind of performed type of thing. I don't think they're going to be as lucky this year, but I do think they will still be in the win column for, with less than likely to have 8 wins, to be honest with you. I think they have 9 or 10. I think that that's their range. Moving on to the Cardinals. So the Cardinals, who do I have them beating? I'm going to have them beat the Saints, split with Carolina, to be honest. That's 2 wins. Maybe they beat San Fran 1 time like last year in a fluke of a game, but probably not. I'm going to actually have them get swept by San Fran. So it's like they're at 2 wins currently. Seattle, I think, sweeps them. I don't think that they beat Seattle once this year. They beat Tennessee, so that's 3 wins. The Colts, you know what? I'll have them beat the Colts. That's 4 wins. And then we're going down the list. Maybe they beat Jacksonville. I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. So it's like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 wins so far. And, it kind of ends there. Maybe they beat Atlanta. Battle of the Birds. I doubt it. But it's like, this is a team to me that I think has something to prove this year. And I think, it would be crazy to go above 7 wins. So I put them down here. Because I do think they have one of the tougher divisions in football, like I said, and it's like we already have, San Fran up here, Rams right here as well. And then the Seahawks. I think the Cardinals are going to be the odd team out. Now we get to the Ravens. So I said I had them beating Buffalo. I'm still going to keep that. I think that that's honestly what's going to happen week 1. Who knows? but then it's like, who do we have this team losing to? You look at it on paper, Kansas City always seems to get the better of the Ravens in the postseason. This is regular season. And I think that, the Ravens really grew a lot last year. I think they still need some postseason growth type of thing, but I have them beating Kansas City here. Who do I have them really losing to? Who do I think are the teams that beat them? Oddly enough, I think Cincinnati splits, so there's one loss. I think they sweep Pittsburgh. I think they finally proved that, hey, we own Pittsburgh right now until proven otherwise. And then it's like the Browns. The Browns aren't going to be able to play them tough either within their division. And it's like Green Bay, if they have a phenomenal year, could be a close and electric game, but I don't have them losing this. So it's like I have the Ravens with like 2 losses, potentially. They could lose, if you're looking at the worst case scenario, they lose the Bills, Chiefs, Rams, Rams, if they lose both games to Cincinnati, that would be wild. And that would be 4 losses. And then Green Bay, that's still only 5 losses. And they're still, like, this is worst case scenario. I think they're honestly up here. I think that they are the next best team, at least player-wise, coach-wise, after the Eagles, even though I hate to say that. Moving on, we have the Chiefs. The Chiefs, what teams do I think that they lose to? I think that, they are going to have a very competitive division like I've shown here. What do I think? I don't think that they fall from grace to where they miss the playoffs like some people are saying. I think that those are wishful hopefuls and kind of weird. I'm going to have them split with the Chargers, so that's 1 loss. Philadelphia, I'm going to have them losing, that's 2. Baltimore is 3 because it is a tough beginning course of the season where they're only like what should be an easy game is the Giants. Then they play Jacksonville, who they always beat. So we're at 3 wins still. They'll beat Detroit. They'll beat Vegas both times. I do believe that. Washington might be a dicey game. I'm going to have them win this game. So it's like we're still at 3 losses. Buffalo, that'll be their 4th. Denver, I'm going to say they split. That is 5. And, that's it. That's really what I have them at. I have them at 5 losses. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, actually, 6 losses. So it's going to seem kind of ridiculous, but it's like I have all 3 of these teams right, here. But I honestly think it's realistic. I think that, you look at this and it's like, this isn't some crazy, I'm an elite team, I'm a good team, which I think is what the Chiefs are, but they could potentially overperform. I mean, we've seen it before. But moving on to the Buccaneers. Buccaneers, I think, are set to be a very, very, very good team, could return to some really good dominance this year. And we look at this, I'm going to have them sweep Atlanta. I think they're going to get revenge this year. I think Atlanta, will really, really see. They need to really prove it to me that they are the team that they are and that those 2 wins where they smeared the Buccaneers last year weren't flukes. And it's like, I think the Buccaneers are going to fix the way they play them and they're going to beat them both times. So they beat Houston. I'm going to have them lose to Philadelphia. That's their first loss. Seattle's tough, but I do think that they beat Seattle. They're going to beat San Fran. I think that they beat Detroit, to be honest, if we're being optimistic, even though it could be a close game. It's a Monday night, obviously. So we have them only losing to Philadelphia so far. Buffalo, I'm going to say that they lose to them just because I think that, Buffalo is going to be a real team to kind of meddle with, and I didn't put them up here lightly. So that's two losses. The Rams, I'm gonna say this. I think they lose to the Rams. I think the Rams just have, kind of something something, you know what I mean, about them. And it's like I think that they lose to the Rams. The other games that I think that they lose to, I don't think that they really lose to anybody else. So it's like that's only three losses. I do have them up here. I think they are one of the better teams. This might seem kind of high to have this many teams up here. I guess maybe I'm just bad at predicting, but this is kind of an optimist of like how good could this team be? And I think the Buccaneers are one of those teams that filled a bunch of needs and they drafted really well. So it's like, that sort of thing. Now we go to the Jets. Now the Jets, what teams do they even beat? They play Pittsburgh week 1, which is, favorable because Pittsburgh's not the best team. I don't see them winning it, though. I do not see them beating Pittsburgh. Buffalo loss. Tampa Bay loss. Miami, probably a loss, to be honest with you. Dallas, I do think will be a loss. Denver. So it's like, who do they really beat? I'm going to have them beat Carolina, which might be surprising. I'm going to actually, I think they'll beat Carolina, to be honest with you. Have them, maybe beat Cleveland. It's a toss-up. We'll say 2 wins there. New England, maybe they split with them. We'll give them 3 wins there. But otherwise, you look at this and then 4 wins with New Orleans. I'm looking at this and I'm kind of like, I think it's going to be a tough rookie year for Aaron Glenn, and we're going to put the Jets here. Now we get to the Steelers. Like I said, the Steelers, I do think they beat New York week 1 just because I think their defense is going to absolutely smother Fields and will really, really, I guess, see. Week 1 is always such a toss-up for most games anyway, but, we'll see. New York, I'm going to give them a win here, and we're only going to really track this by wins to really see if they get above 500 type of thing. And I'm moving down Seattle loss, New England loss, Minnesota, a likely loss, in my opinion. Cleveland plays them tough. We'll say they split with Cleveland like they did last year, which was crazy. Cincinnati, I think they get swept by. So it's like we have, how many wins do we have? We have 2 wins so far. The Colts, I'll give them a win here just because I'm unsure about the offense of the Colts in the QB situation. That'll be 3 wins. 3 wins. Chicago, a game I think they could win, but probably won't. So I'm going to still stay at 3, to be honest with you. And then Miami. It's an interesting game. Do they beat Miami? I don't think so. So yeah, I'm looking at this as a team that it's like, I hate to do this, but it's like they lost talent and they've made moves that are strange. And it's like, who the heck knows who they have at quarterback? It's like, it's going to be up to, honestly, Watt to win them a lot of games, which not that he can't do it. He's a special player, but it's like, what are they going to do offensively? Their offense is so flat. But now we look at the Commanders here. So I'm going to go over the games I think that they lose because I do think the Commanders will be in the win column, even though they are kind of a spicy team. And I wouldn't say they got really better in the run game, even though they did have good O-line members, but I don't think they have like that back that's going to be insane, type of thing. So I'm going to have them lose against the Packers. And then we look down here, lose against the Chargers. There's 2 losses. Kansas City, is this a loss? I think this will be a tough test for Daniels, but I do think that, and it's at Kansas City, I think they lose here. It's Monday Night Primetime. I mean, Daniels loves the limelight type of thing. This could, 3rd loss. Detroit, I think, will be a toss-up. That could be their 4th loss. We'll just say that. Uh, Denver and Minnesota are interesting after those games in the later part of the season. I think that, Minnesota could beat them, and same with Denver. That's so wait, how many losses is that? So Green Bay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll only go down, we'll go down to 5. I think they do win one of these games, with Denver and Minnesota type of thing. And then Philadelphia. I think there's a world where they get swept at the end of the season here. And it's like, maybe, type of thing, but it's another prime time game. So it's like, that's like 6 losses, that type of thing. So it's like, I have the Commanders here. Prove to me that you can really be amongst these teams, for a second year in a row, and that the rookie year wasn't like a fluke type of thing. Now we get to our final team, the Texans, an interesting team. I'm not going to be super high on them because, to be honest with you, I think that they are kind of, but it's one of those things that it's like they didn't really improve their O-line very much. What teams do I have them winning against? So their first win, in all honesty, I think, could be against Jacksonville. I think they're going to split with Jacksonville in their division, to be honest with you. I do think they sweep Tennessee, to be honest with you. So it's like there's 3 wins, if you're including those divisional games. Baltimore, Seattle, both losses in my eyes. I think that San Fran beats them too. So it's like we're at 3 wins still. Denver, I think, is a loss. Buffalo, a loss, 3. Indianapolis, I do think that they sweep. So that's 5 wins. So we have, Jacksonville split, Tennessee sweep, 3, 4, 5 with, the Indianapolis sweep. And then, Raiders, I think that they can beat, 6. But it's like, I think that the Texans, I think their defense will help them a lot. But it's like, do we have the gall to put them up here? Do we? I think that their division overall, I'm just not very high on. And it's like one of those things to me that it's like you look at the teams in their division, it's like, where do I have? We have Jacksonville here. We have, the Titans here and here. Maybe I do go and say that they're the division winner for this division, and they obviously get into the playoffs. But I don't see this as an easy schedule for them. I just don't. I think they play a lot of, good teams. And it's like, Indianapolis is obviously, probably the worst team in this division, in my opinion, with their situation. I think that they know they overperformed last year, and the QB situation isn't getting better. Whereas it's like the rest of these teams, you have the Jaguars, the Texans, and then the Titans. And I think the Titans, you could say that, hey, they don't have their QB situation figured out. But it's like, that's, this is one of those things that I think the Texans, have a lot to prove this year, and their O-line just doesn't instill confidence in me. I think that they do have a good running back room, with Mixon and another guy they drafted, but overall, I like a few of the players they drafted, and I like their defense, but it's like, they're going to have to hold teams down, really, really low unless their offensive line is drastically better, and I think last year they were really stumbling into the playoffs, and it's like it was rough. But overall, you guys, I know this is a long one, an hour and a half going over these teams, and counting that sort of thing. But if you made it to the end of the video and you really like this and you think that, hey, this team should be here or here, I'm just kind of playing it by, my own feelings and that sort of thing. And obviously, it's like, this would be a dream scenario to have clearly my Packers, this high or no, and certain other scenarios, right? And it's like that sort of thing. But I tried to do the best with this as I can, being optimistic for every single team, is maybe why this is kind of, we have a lot of, 4 to 7 teams, and then, this kind of stuff. But we'll see. This is kind of my way too early. What were my predictions, list? But I mean, it's kind of my, the way that I'm confident with the league and the way that the schedules break down, looking at every single schedule type of thing, but I want to thank you all for watching. And as always, go Pack Go.